On today's episode of Star Wars Factions Compared, we take a look at the worst ships used by several Star Wars factions. Hey everyone, this is EckhartsLadder. Hello and welcome to another episode of Star Wars Factions Compared. Today, we are joined by a very special guest.
Hey everyone, it's Andrew from Bombastic. It's good to be here. How's it going?
Andrew and I will be looking at the Separatists, New Republic, Rebellion, Empire, Resistance, and the First Order in order to determine which one has the worst ship or starfighter. Worst here will mean anything that is poorly designed, hardly functional, not very effective, or just stupid. Before we get started, I do just want to mention that we also made another one of these videos for Andrew's channel, where we're looking at the worst ground vehicles and tanks for each faction. There are some really hilariously terrible designs. I think you guys will enjoy checking that out. I've put a link in the upper right hand corner and also the description. Alright, let's dig into this and find the worst ship. I think it's important to remember that although the ships on this list are all visually a little bit odd, it's important to distinguish between an ugly ship and one that doesn't work. Alright, let's start with the Confederacy of Independent Systems and their Solar Sailor. People are generally split on this ship. They either love it or they hate it. However, aesthetics aside, the ship does have some serious issues. It's most effective when operating close to a star. Stars, however, even in the Star Wars universe, take up a relatively small amount of the overall space. The sail itself is also quite vulnerable, and I think a shot from a laser cannon could easily puncture it, ruining the ship.
So, I mean, the general concept behind the Solar Sailor is kind of cool. Basically, the sails absorb space energy or ultraviolet rays or tachyon streams, which converts to power to propel the ship forward until the hyperdrive kicks in. So they don't use any actual fuel. But what I find hilarious about these bad boys is the very fact that to fly in space, they have to deploy this massive parachute thing that looks like it pulls the ship forward, which makes them obviously extremely vulnerable to attack from anyone or anything. A laser blast, space debris, Princess Leia floating through space on a Force mission. Apparently these things are almost untraceable because they don't use any fuel. I guess that's kind of neat.
Next we have the New Republic and their K-Wing starfighter. This is an example of a ship which, although looking a little silly, still maintains a high degree of functionality. I don't think there's any way you could call the K-Wing the worst vessel on this list. The K-Wing was an even more effective bomber than the Y-Wing. Despite its larger size, it maintained a comparable speed while bringing into battle an extreme amount of ordnance. I think the worst thing about this ship, frankly, is the way it looks, although I know there are some serious fans of the K-Wing. You don't typically see missiles or torpedoes strapped under the wings of ships as they are with this starfighter. However, it works for the K-Wing. The ship is fast, it's a capital ship killer, and it has unique ball-shaped laser cannons to help defend against enemy starfighters. It also possesses, among other weapons, a quad turbo laser, which is fairly rare for starfighters, although we will see it again on this list.
Alright, so I honestly think the K-Wing is quite functional, and it reminds me of some 1960s Thunderbirds vehicle. But seriously, who needs that many weapons? I mean, just look at them all. Look, and that wingspan? It's a big ship for only these little cockpits. I mean, it looks cool, but it just seems a bit impractical, you know? Leave a comment if you ever watch the Thunderbirds. Okay, next, I think you're gonna love this one. The Empire's TIE Experimental M1. I mean, I don't really think much needs to be said about this one. I think it's funny, this ship is also referred to as the TIE Bizarro. So what they've done here is basically taken a regular old TIE fighter and swapped the wings with the cockpits.
I don't know really how much you can say about the TIE Experimental Mark I. I mean, just look at the thing. It kind of reminds me of Alien Resurrection when they find all those Ripley clones and there's just something wrong about each one of them, and then they find one that can speak and it just asks to be killed. I think if starfighters could speak, it would ask also to be destroyed. This thing is just a monstrosity. It's got that one wing in the middle. I understand that the wings of a TIE fighter may not be for maneuverability, but just makes this ship looks super weird. It has a hyperdrive for some reason, but needs a control ship for navigational purposes. It has its main weapon away from the cockpit, kind of like the weird brother of the B-Wing, and most questionably, instead of having a laser cannon, it's fitted with a turbo laser. Turbolasers in the Star Wars universe are traditionally used for taking on capital ships, while laser cannons are used for fighting other starfighters. That means that this thing is primarily more of a bomber than any sort of interceptor or strike craft. TIE fighters are already easy targets given their lack of shield. This just makes things even worse for any pilot poor enough to be selected to fly this thing. Next up we have sort of the Rebel Alliance but more Cloud City and the Cloud Car. Cloud cars are traditionally civilian craft and, well, it shows. There's no reason that the Cloud Car needs to be a two-seater, it just gives it a large target profile. It is fast, but it has almost no shields and very light weapons. I think the design also looks super junky, and the Cloud Car is not meant to operate in space. Besides for its likely decent speed and maneuverability, there's not much good I can say about it.
The Clown Car was even mocked and joked about in the Star Wars Battlefront 2 campaign.
What about that?
A cloud car?
It's a ship?
Fine.
When I said we needed a ship, I should have been more specific.
It has weapons. What more do you want?
For it not to be a cloud car.
You have to look through the window to talk to the guy in the other side. I mean, that's just stupid. But something I wonder is if Lando, the suavest, smoothest, most handsome mustached man in the galaxy, rode around in one of these things. I mean, if you think about it, it kind of fits, but then again, you know what? I'll leave that for you to decide.
Next is the Resistance transport ship. I think this ship is best described in one of Bombastic's videos.
That is the ugliest Star Wars ships I've ever seen.
How about we make a ship? It's a brick, right? Except sideways.
Yeah, it looks like
sideways on the edge.
It looked like
I find myself being kind of annoyed by this transport. It's basically a Rebel Alliance style ship hobbled together out of other ship parts. It's very disappointing to me that in episode 7, instead of getting some flashy New Republic vessels almost like we had in the prequels, we instead get this thing, the flying shoebox. It's not clear to me whether the transport is shielded, but it's got hardly anything in way of weaponry, with only a single laser cannon. Oh, also the laser cannon only points forward, so if you've got starfighters behind you, which if you're flying such a slow vessel like this is probably pretty likely, you're not going to be able to defend against them.
Seriously though, Resistance, get your act together. This is some really uninspired ship design right here. I mean, like, just no good. Okay, finally, we have the First Order. Now this one's a little different. We decided that there was no one single bad First Order ship. Rather, instead, the First Order are just bad. Their fundamental belief is that if the Resistance destroys one of their ships, then they'll just build a bigger one. A way bigger one. Alright, so the First Order obviously has its roots in the Empire. They built the first Death Star, it got destroyed. So they built a fleet of Star Destroyers and another even bigger Death Star. They got destroyed. So they regrouped as the First Order and went, the rebels seem to be destroying all our ships and designs. I know, we'll make them bigger. We'll build a bigger one. That gets destroyed. So they build another fleet of Star Destroyers with this big ass dreadnought that they think will be 10 times scarier and more powerful than the last few. You know what happens? It all gets destroyed. All of it. Conclusion, the First Order, the engineers, whoever's coming up with these ideas, they're all idiots. That's all there is to it. Anything you want to add to this, Eckharts? I'm pretty riled up about this. You know, I'm very passionate about these issues. The First Order, they're a piece of crap. They don't know what they're doing.
Yeah, I agree with most of what Andrew said about the First Order. Instead of learning from the Empire, they've included to make fleets out of just Star Destroyers. Where are the corvettes, the frigates, the smaller ships? In The Last Jedi, for example, they specifically cannot attack the Raddus, which allows the Resistance to eventually destroy the Supremacy. You know what could have fixed that? Smaller, faster ships. Still, the First Order did do some things right. With their mainline cruiser, the Resurgent, they've at least included point defense cannons, something that was seriously missing on the Imperial II class Star Destroyer, and their fighters now also have shields. Their navy still lacks some flexibility, and in The Last Jedi I would actually classify it as impotent. We've covered a lot of topic today. With all of these ship descriptions out of the way, let's now rank them from worst to best. Coming in at worst is the TIE X1. Not only does this thing look super goofy, but it doesn't seem to be very effective. TIEs are almost always used as interceptors or strike craft because they're very fast and they're not shielded. This TIE is supposed to operate as a bomber, I guess. It has a turbo laser which would be hardly effective against other starfighters. I mean, I get that this is an experimental fighter, but it's still really bad, and in my opinion, the worst on this list. Coming in next is the Cloud Car, although I put an asterisk next to it. The Cloud Car is not really meant for combat. It's hardly a Rebel Alliance vehicle, it would more accurately be described as a vehicle of Cloud City, but to be honest, it's not great. It's hardly armed, doesn't appear to be shielded, and although it is fast, I don't understand why it has those two huge bulbs for a cockpit. Next we have the Resistance Transport, and we've seen transports done well in the Star Wars universe. For example, the LAT is highly armed and can dish out a lot of damage while also bringing troops into battle. The Resistance Transport, on the other hand, is not only ugly, but only has one laser cannon which can only fire forward. This thing is like the easiest target ever for any starfighter. Come on, JJ, we expected more. Next we have the Solar Sailor. The idea of having a ship which can use the power from a star to stay off an enemy's scopes is good in theory, but I do question just how practical it is. That being said, Count Dooku used it, and you know, I think that's good enough for me. Next we have the First Order. I think I pretty succinctly explained the benefits and drawbacks of First Order fleet doctrine, but just to sum it up, their individual ships are designed fairly well. The Resurgence is a good battle cruiser, it improves on many of the mistakes made by the Imperial II. However, the First Order's general reliance on large ships only and seemingly forgetting about frigates and corvettes really leaves me scratching my head. Finally, we have the K-Wing. Despite being, at least in the eyes of many, a horrendously ugly ship, the K-Wing is very effective. It's basically a case study on the fact that ugliest doesn't always mean worst, and for that reason I think it only makes sense that it gets the top spot on this list. Anyway guys, those are some of the worst ships from the Star Wars universe. I couldn't have made this video without help from Andrew from Bombastic.
Thanks for having me, EckhartsLadder. Like we said before, we made another one of these videos for my channel, Bombastic, with all the worst ground vehicles and tanks for each faction. There's actually some really bad ones I only just discovered, so if you want to check that out, we'll link it in the description and at the end of this video. So which ship do you think is the worst? You can vote in the upper right hand corner and leave a comment in the description.
Thanks for watching guys. As always, may the Force be with you.
Thanks for watching guys, see ya!